joined by Councilmember Joe Buscaino and Mitch O'Farrell. Thanks for being here as well. We're going to jump right into general public comment, multi-comment cards. Mr. Herman, no longer here. We'll take your name off the queue. Are you here? Oh, come on up. By the way, before you come on up, you filled out multiple cards. We saw you on the queue adding a bunch of other names. They've all come up here as well. You've been warned in other committees to do that. If you do that again and you fill out more than one name and you make up other names, it's actually technically disrupting this meeting. And so you won't be able to speak at all. And you can sit here quietly and forfeit all your time if you do it again. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go back before actually leave the table right now. Go back and take those names off with the sergeant, point out which ones you did, and if you don't do that, you will not speak at this meeting at all. So go ahead and leave before you're disrupting this meeting. Go back to the back, work with the sergeant, and clear off the other names that we already saw you putting in.
I didn't do anything.
Okay, then you're out of this meeting for disrupting it.
No,
you were caught, you were seen doing it.
You caught me.
And we see the names on here.
Fuck you.
Okay, you're out of here. You're disrupting this meeting.
Fucking big
Thank
ear.
you. Goodbye. You're continuing to disrupt this meeting, and you're yelling into this meeting. You're disrupting it and using other words. So, no, you're disrupting this meeting. Herman, you're out. You're out. You're disrupting this meeting. You're done. Stop yelling out from this meeting. You're done. You're going to continue to disrupt this meeting? I'm going to ban you from the next one as well. Okay, you're now banned from the next Public Safety Committee meeting as well. Do you want to keep going? So, Sergeant, the next Public Safety Committee meeting, he's forbidden from even walking into this room. Okay, he's continuing to disrupt this meeting and yell out offensive. And okay, so that's 2 more meetings. So he's banned for the next 2 meetings because this deters not only the meeting from taking place, but it also deters other members of the public wishing to speak and blocking this meeting. Wayne Spindler, you're not in the room. And the reason your name is on here is because Herman put your name on, as we saw you do during the kiosk. That's one of the many multiple names he's now entered and made names up. These are many of the same names that he continues to enter in on other meetings, and this will no longer occur in my committee. So, and is there a Tia here? Let me ask you this. Is there anybody here in the room, in a filled room, that has actually put their name on the kiosk to speak on any of the items or for public comment at all? Seeing none, which means that Herman put over a dozen names, and we'll let the record be noted, over a dozen names that he made up to disrupt this meeting purposely, to take more time, as we called, fictitious names. Many of these names are vulgar, so he's trying to get the chair of these committees to say these names publicly on a microphone. It's not only disruptive to this process, it's disgusting.
And for the record, Mr. Chair, they do this at every single committee hearing that I'm part of as well.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is anytime that's done, I will view that as a disruption of the committee meeting, and they will forfeit all their time. And if they disrupt the meeting as they're leaving the meeting, they will be banned from the next meeting. And so I understand I can't ban them from multiple meetings or more than a period of time. So we'll officially let the sergeants know that at the next Public Safety Committee meeting, Herman will be banned from the next one, just the one. All right, with that, colleagues, I've got a number of items and we'll go ahead and close public comment now at this time, since there are no other cards here for either any of the items or general public comment. Number of items for consent. I'd like to hear items 1 and item 3, and the balance of the agenda be considered for consent unless any of the members wish to call those special.
Move the balance.
The balance? Okay, then that'll be the order without objection. We'll go ahead and move items 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on consent. And we'll approve any technical corrections or CAO reports along with those items. Okay, thank you very much. With that, let's go ahead and hear item 1. Prop 47 grant and reserve loan. Is there anybody here on that CAO's office? Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for being here. Sorry for the delay in getting started with all the disruptions from Mr. Herman, and I appreciate you all being here on time and ready to report. So thank you for that. So on this grant, I was curious. We originally, I know, had it slated for a possible consent item, but any Prop 47 grant programs, I usually do call special, as you know. This is overall either part of or addition to the roughly $6 million total, I think, that we're looking for in the period from June of 2017 to August 15th of 2020. I believe that's a total of roughly $6 million to the City of LA from Prop 47. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this $400,000 you're asking for is a reserve fund advance. And if you could walk me through why we're taking out an advance from the reserve fund for this purpose.
Yes, Caitlin Nishigoka with the Mayor's Office of Public Safety. That is because this grant is a reimbursement grant only. We tried to negotiate with the grantor to conduct it otherwise, but unfortunately the grantor felt very strongly that this had to be reimbursement only. So essentially what will happen is once our agencies provide us the invoices, we will have to pay back those agencies with this reserve fund loan. And then on a monthly basis, we will be receiving that reimbursement from the state to replenish the reserve fund loan.
So let me just voice my displeasure with this, not with you, with the state of California, and I'll be clear. I personally feel that the state of California in Prop 47 completely and totally misled the voters, the general public, and the municipalities, and believing that 47 we're going to create and save tens of millions of dollars that we're going to trickle down to the local level in an expedited fashion for these critical services, and it's done just the opposite, quite frankly. And in fact, according to the Chief Legislative Analyst's Office in the state of California, there's tens of millions of dollars on the table that are not being realized from 47. It's been a sham and a complete lie. And in fact, I would move that we should probably band together as cities and sue the state of California for our $47. It's also led to an increase in crime on our streets, and coupled with 57 and 109, it's become and I know this wasn't anticipated, although I think many in the criminal justice system and in that sphere believed it would, and we've now realized, and I think many people have, that combined together without the delivery of the services that were promised has been one of the most potent mixes of legislation that have wreaked havoc on cities. And now you fast forward to the fact that we've got to borrow money and lose interest and lose what is a reserve fund for a rainy day fund, for an emergency fund that we fight every day so hard to make sure those dollars are there. Now we have to borrow out of it because we have to go and beg for our loose change, if you will, the pennies of a percentage of what we were promised from the state of California, because we're not even getting that in a timely fashion, is absolutely criminal in and of itself. And I think the proponents, and particularly the ones that are implementing now 47, not the ones that necessarily, well, I'll throw everybody into the mix on this, but the ones in Sacramento who are implementing this are doing so poorly that it doesn't give us an opportunity to staff up, to spend those monies wisely, to make sure we get an economies of scale, to make sure we have targeted programs for reducing the rate of recidivism. And while I applaud that the three of you, our dream team, has really figured out how to stretch these dollars by putting them out to service providers rather than trying to do everything in-house, which I complimented you on last time you were here, and you continue to do that. You're doing so with so little resources. And it's ridiculous that they've done this to us. So anyway, I wanted to bring you up to say thank you to you, and shame on the state of California for doing this to all the cities in California. But colleagues, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I do, Mr. Chair. And my comments have been very similar to what you just stated, so I won't beat a dead horse here, but I commend the three of you for your work on this. And you've heard me say this before as well. You're going above and beyond to figure out how to dole out $6 million over a 3-year period on a reimbursed basis. The campaign for Prop 47 was a fraudulent campaign. It's an abject failure across the whole state. And what's frustrating is that before this ballot initiative to reform Prop 47 was actually initiated, our own state assembly wouldn't even hear it in committee to reform it at the state level. They're so out of touch with what a failure Prop 47 is. And that's very frustrating to me. So I'm hopeful that the voters, because it passed in California with a pretty strong margin, they were sold a bill of goods. I definitely opposed the resolution supporting 47 4 years ago as a council member because I knew it was problematic. And I think that municipalities across the state have been negatively affected by it, and voters are wise to how they were misled to support it. Perfectly reasonable people that I respect really were passionately in support of Prop 47 because of its stated goals. And those goals were worthy, but the campaign was really fraudulent in misleading voters into supporting something that pulled on their heartstrings. And that's why I think there's so much cynicism in the electorate. It's because of campaigns like Prop 47, and cities are dealing with it now. I proposed filing a lawsuit a couple of years ago over the failure, and I hope that we will. I think we should take legal action and just see where that leads us, because we are not getting, we were told we'd get in the tens of millions of dollars every year to address the social ills that Prop 47 purported to focus on. And that just isn't happening. Instead, we're seeing growing encampments, the inability to get people who are addicted to opioids, heroin and meth, et cetera, into diversion programs because we can't force them to anymore by reducing a felony charge to a misdemeanor charge. It's a disaster, and it's really harming our cities. And really, with what we're doing with this bridge housing and the growing homeless crises, Prop 47 is an ingredient in all of this, and we're spending taxpayer dollar to take care of this. So I'm hoping for two things: that we take a look at our legal options, and that the voters in California will vigorously support reforming Prop 47, since our state politicians refuse to. But again, I think what you're doing is amazing with what you're given. And it really, I think it's so unfortunate you're put in this disadvantage. So I want to thank you for what you're doing, but also join in the lament, because this has been very frustrating. And our neighborhoods are feeling the effects. And the LAPD and the fire department, God knows they are. And I'll go to community meetings, and people will ask, what are you going to do about this growing homeless crisis? The first thing I ask them is, did you vote for Prop 47? And a lot of hands go up, and I say, well, you're partially responsible because you're unwittingly told that it would help people, and it's really not. And that's the downside of all this, I think. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
No.
But I think we've got to do something about it, local level, state level, and I'm all on board for reforming Prop 47. And I don't care what the media says. I know the LA Times supports Prop 47, and I would ask them to take off their rose-colored glasses and take a real look at the consequences of what Prop 47 has done to our city.
No, I appreciate that, and I love everything you just said. It was spot on, and I will tell you, many of those in the media that are reporting that Prop 47 is working and give it more time, it's more than rose-colored glasses, and the story is written before they start doing any interviews with anyone, and they hand-pick their experts in the field to weigh in on every one of these stories that aren't worth the paper they're written on. We see the effects directly. There's not a single person in law enforcement that I know of, or a district attorney that says that this is literally in the criminal justice system. This is one of the worst things we have ever done in the state of California.
Look what it's doing to those who are addicted.
Right, they're doing a disservice.
They're dying.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's no sort of societal way for an intervention now.
Well, here's the biggest problem is you've also taken all of these, what would have been possible felony drug convictions, and instead of giving an offer and an option and another door to those in front of a judge or a drug court to say, you're going to serve time, you've hit rock bottom, this is your bottom. And because you're not going to do anything until you've hit bottom, until you've recognized you've got a problem, until you're willing to join a 12-step program, and oftentimes those are options only given to you when you're faced with something so drastic like losing all of your freedoms at that point and being incarcerated. And at that point saying, okay, you shall, not may, but shall go to a treatment program and come back and report back that you've gone every single day for a month or every week for a year or whatever that is, and many do and many have. And now that's gone. The option is gone completely. It's a citation at best, which often goes unpaid. And then you see what's happening on our streets with this homeless population of many and most, and I will argue most, who are living in and on the streets today have serious addiction issues and mental health because of the addiction issues. And we have handcuffed the justice system to try to work with them, to give them the options towards sobriety, treatment, rehabilitation, intervention, prevention. Those are gone. And this is what this has done. And now we're borrowing money from the taxpayer's savings account in increments because we're not even getting what was promised as a fraction of what was promised from the state of California. That's insane.
And I don't think voters wanted that. Voters would not have wanted this to be the outcome of what they voted to support. They were fooled into this by the campaign for Prop 47.
No doubt. Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too share the sentiments, concerns, and comments by my colleagues here in the Public Safety Committee. I like many voters, supported Prop 47. And I firsthand saw the revolving door of how we made the arrests on the field and that none of these individuals were getting treated. But I, like many voters in the state, were fooled, completely fooled. And here we are today, as the chairman said, we now need to advance money because we can't get it in time. And the fact that if you look at when this was passed in 2014, nearly 4 years later, and in 4 years we've seen challenges in the opioid crisis, we've seen a rise in homelessness, we've seen a spike in property-related crimes in our streets, and yet we still can't get the money that was promised to us from the state. That is completely wrong. And, thinking ahead, I'm happy to see that, we're creating 4 hubs, 4 specific areas in the city that's going to treat some of these symptoms, including Watts. I'm happy to see Watts being one of the hubs. But my question to you is, I still feel that the nearly $6 million that's coming for this Prop 47 grant award is not enough. And when can we expect the next allocation? Do we have to wait till 2020? Is it going to be beyond August 15, 2020, or are we going to see something come sooner for the next allocation of grant dollars?
I'm not sure, but I know the Board of State and Community Corrections is thinking about doing this in rounds, and so I would anticipate that they would have something to share with us about that within the next year or so, because they would want to sort of keep it going as far as I'm aware, and that's kind of what they've told us so far.
And the allocation, if I recall, is based on population and needs. Is that correct?
You mean? for where we've decided to
Right.
distribute the money. Yeah, we chose those 4 regions basically based on census data on areas with highest poverty and crime rates.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
No, just-
All right, thank you very much. So we reluctantly support moving forward and borrowing these funds to move forward with these programs that are critically sensitive and timely. And we appreciate all the work that you all do in swimming upstream and thinking outside the box and trying to stretch these dollars far beyond how they're programmed. So thank you for that, and keep up the great work. I think there's a consensus from my colleagues, if nobody heard it clearly enough, that there will be a very public display, if not action by the City Council in various motions to go after the state of California in the very, very near future. And we'll be collectively working on that in the next couple weeks. So I think you'll hear a lot more from us outside of committee on this. So thank you very much. That item is approved. With that, I'd like to welcome also Councilmember David Rue, who was here for that vote. And in fact, what we'll do is we'll reconsider all the items that were forwarded on consent, so we can add Mr. Rue to those as well. Okay. And then also on number 1, though, we need to refer that over to Budget and Finance Committee, since it's a reserve fund loan. So we'll go ahead and refer that Prop 47 to Budget and Finance, which I don't think you'll have a problem, but we'll follow those protocols. Okay, and then with that, we're going to hear item 3. Oh, and for the record, after Herman, Armando Herman, was rejected for this meeting, he went out to the kiosk, was observed entering in multiple more names on the speaker queue that did come up on our queue list. And so I want it to be noted that he is expelled from the next Public Safety Committee meeting, and that will be on the record that he continued, even after he was escorted out of this meeting, to continue to disrupt this meeting from occurring. So, and we'll go ahead and hear item 3.
Item number 3 is a report from the City Administrative Officer relative to implementing an unwanted fire alarm program.
Morning.
Good morning, council members. Janice Yu, Office of the CAO. Before you is a CAO report that provides analysis and recommendations on fire's proposed unwanted alarm program. The fire department has proposed and is in the process of implementing a program to reduce the reports of calls for and engine company responses deployed for what we commonly know as false alarms. The program is named the Unwanted Alarm Program to distinguish it from what is known as false alarms, which are considered malicious alarms that are misdemeanors, but these are unwanted alarms that are triggered because of malfunctioning systems or some other issue that isn't made in a malicious way. So the goal is to reduce the number of these alarms. The process for establishing the program includes establishing a permit fee, which may include inspection to ensure alarms are in properly working function, and also establishing an enforcement program to encourage buildings to ensure they maintain properly working systems. Since it is a new program, a significant portion of attention should be directed towards outreach to the community to educate them about having properly working alarm systems and some of the requirements such as adhering to Regulation 4 testing. The department already has several components in progress, including a draft ordinance to establish this program. And we have worked with them on determining a calculation for establishing the enforcement fee, which is described in the report. and also identifying a contractor to manage permitting, billing, and collections for the program. Some things that are outstanding that still need to be worked on are finalizing the draft ordinance, which requires working with the city attorney's office, and our recommendation to also work with the city attorney to establish a permit fee using accepted methods for determining what is a proper fee. And we worked with the LAPD to understand how their false alarm program works, and the FIRE's program models this somewhat, but there are some differences. And if you have any questions, I'm here, and the department is also here to answer any of those.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, I'd like to bring the department up to the table as well. Colleagues, I want to give you a little background about this and why it's so important before we start jumping into this. I have been looking at this for years and years and years. The fact that we have over 10,000 false alarms to the fire department each year alone, and what does that mean? What does a false alarm mean? So a false alarm means that an alarm call is going to go out that either is a medical condition or a fire, unknown, at a location, and deploy resources from the fire department. It means that you've got apparatus running code 3 through the city of LA, lights and sirens, blowing intersections, putting not only the firefighters in harm's way just to get there, but also the general public. On top of that, you've taken all of those resources, whether it's an RA, depending on who's being deployed, but let's call it the cavalry because that's what we've traditionally done until we've recently tightened that up. So you're rolling all of these resources and you're taking them offline away from a real medical or other type of emergency. So what does that mean? So with having limited resources, and this is through recessions and rolling brownouts and staffing issues and at a cost of millions and millions of taxpayer dollars, what you've really done is you've put somebody else who's in a real emergency instead of this false alarm in harm's way. Lives have actually been lost. We've had people die because we're running the false alarms, and then we had to deploy out of another bureau, out of another division, and another station, resources because those resources were tied up. And so they're coming from a further distance, a different location, unfamiliar territory perhaps, where they don't even know where they're headed because of outdated technology and other resources that have been limited over these many, many years, decades of this, where they were looking at literally maps, hand-printed maps to try to find locations because they're not familiar. They're coming from another location. People have died. What's worse? Well, there's not much worse than that. But what adds insult to injury is that many of these locations are the same locations over and over and over again. Chronic false alarms. I then, after looking at this issue, put in a motion to create a false alarm fee, if nothing more but a deterrent that has a rolling and escalating fee to make people fix their alarm, or the alarm companies stop deploying the fire department instead of PD. PD has had a false alarm for years, and it's worked effectively. It's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to save lives. In fact, PD created, because of the outcry of the fee, an alarm school similar to traffic school that you can take online and learn how to properly set your alarm and what it means when you have a false alarm. And then if you go through the alarm school, there's no fee. It also has a penalty for not registering if you have an alarm, which is a requirement in the city of LA. So we know who's got a real alarm and who doesn't, and that it's actually tied to an address and not just a phone number. there's a reason for that. So I submitted this in 2012. It's been 6 years. We've brought this back many, many times, and it's been a lot more complicated than we thought. It's not just replicating or duplicating LAPD, because the fire department shall respond to other locations and certain locations that can't serve a fee or not, like public schools, and it becomes complicated. And so it was a little more complicated than we thought. And I kept pressing and pushing that we shall do this, we have to do this. Lives have been lost. Because of this, lives will be saved. Here we are today. The department has been not only working through so many other issues beyond this that have turned this department around through fire stat and new types of deployments with rapid response, with NPUs, with all different types of new methods and best practices that they've also been chipping away at this. I really appreciate it. So sorry for the long introduction of this legislation, but I have been working on this for about 10 years, and we're here today. And to me, this one's personal. So thank you all for being here. If you can just give us a thumbnail beyond that of what the next steps are and what you think from the department this will mean.
Good morning. June Gibson with the Fire Department. Yes, I absolutely agree with Councilman. He has been taking the lead on this issue. And if I may just comment in terms of, where we are now, just to bring it forward. The current fire chief recognizes that the program, in effect, is really a billing program. And for that reason, what you have before you is a recommendation for how to administer the billing and assessing of the permits. And we recognized that the model that was implemented by the police department for the fire department would not be cost efficient. And for that reason, we had recommended to the CAO in the chief's initial letter to them with recommendations in terms of how the program should be implemented would be on the basis of contracting out for the service. And in contracting out for the service, it would end up saving the city significant amounts relative to startup costs. And maybe, if I can kind of throw in a silver lining in terms of the delay in the process. When our Bureau became involved with the implementation of the program, we had the opportunity to review some of the prior documents of the efforts that were made by the Fire Prevention Bureau, and there was an effort, to try to implement this program, Councilman, so it certainly was not something that the department had ignored. But I think the silver lining relative to the delay in the process is that there is now a company, Public Safety Corporation, which in fact is the same company that established the Cry Wolf system for the LAPD. So they've been the prominent private firm throughout the nation in implementing a self-contained system wherein we could contract with them, and what our plan is to explore the contract that they have with the City of Dallas. City of Dallas is a agency, obviously, that's comparable to the size of the fire department, and the program and the contract that they have in effect would provide for a cost share of 90% revenue to the city and 10% to the company. The system that they have is, as I indicated, self-contained. It has an alarm school. It has a permit registration process. They have a call center where complaints will be received by the public, but clearly there would be close partnership and integration with the CAD system so that they can receive the information relative to the false alarms that are received by the department. There is going to be a significant amount of time before we can implement the program. Obviously, we have to initiate the ordinance, which would mean that we'll have to work with the city attorney's office, but we'll also be working with PSC to implement the various steps for proper implementation. So we look forward to being able to implement this as soon as possible. We've been in contact with the city attorney's office. They're ready to work with us, and hopefully we can come back within 6 months to give you a comprehensive report back in terms of what the program looks like, what the ordinance entails, and move forward from there.
Okay, two things on that. One is since the motion was introduced, there's been roughly 75,000 false alarms to the fire department alone since this was introduced. not wanting to wait another day, obviously. Why 6 months? We're there. What's going to take 6 months to set this up? I'm not getting that part.
Well, obviously, I'm using the outside limit. You know, our intent obviously is to come back much sooner than that. The concern that I have is the timing with respect to being able to work through the contracting process, because it does take a while in order for us to negotiate an agreement with the vendor, and it has to go through our fire commission.
Because we already have a contract with the same vendor as what you said, with PD, correct?
Well,
So it's an amendment, or it's a separate contract
no, it has to
completely?
be a separate agreement because the
Okay.
terms and conditions are completely different.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we are going to have to negotiate a contract with PSC for the services that we want, because the
Right.
services that they're going to be providing
A little
to us
different. Got it.
completely different
Sure.
from the police department.
Okay.
And it is going to take some time for us to work with them relative to the various steps in integrating their system with our CAD. So I'm being very conservative, obviously,
Okay.
in terms of being able to do that.
Okay.
We did try to get as much information as we could from them for implementation, but obviously because we don't have a contract with them, they were reluctant to spend as much time as we would have liked.
Got it. Okay. Colleagues?
A couple of quick questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your work on this. And thank you for your work on this, 10 years. So what types of businesses are the most frequent or the most common in terms of the false alarms? What
Good morning.
properties, businesses?
Good morning. Rod Suter, Battalion Chief, the Fire Prevention Bureau. Most of them are the high-rises and your commercial businesses. We're going quite a few of those. We have a problem with businesses downtown in the Skid Row area are real problems for us. Like the council member said, multiple alarms going there. So we're working really closely with the city attorney's office to try to mitigate those alarms, but it's most of those businesses.
Let me just interrupt on that, because I've done a deep dive into this too. Many are, for the frequent locations, are ones that are under construction, where the contractors are not paying any attention and shutting it off, and they don't care. Many of them absolutely don't care. So we roll out, they show up, and we're saying, okay, you're cutting walls down, you've got to shut off the alarm system, and then you can continue working. Oh, yeah, we'll get to it. They don't do it because there's no penalty.
And there's no immediate check for verification. You just send out the equipment and the resources.
Yeah, there is no verification protocol at this point. Another big offender is the schools.
Yeah.
We go there quite a bit.
And so it's a combination of faulty systems and faulty management of those systems.
That's correct.
And then who gets cited? Is it the owner of the property, the on-site management of the property, whoever has the lease of a property, or who gets cited?
It would be just very similar to what LAPD does. So it would be the owner of the property,
Okay.
and that's exactly. And if it's a renter or a leasee, that owner, it's incumbent upon them to go after, just like you would any other type of nuisance, if you will.
Let me ask you, since you mentioned, Ellie, a lot of it's schools, right? There's the whole separation and governmental structure from the state. So if we were to cite a school, would we have local jurisdiction of them being legally obligated to pay a fine for a false alarm?
That's a great question. Working with the California State Fire Marshal's Office, who oversees the schools, Title 19, with us, we would work hand in hand to come up with a program to help that. That is a good question.
I will weigh into that. There's a history that some of you may remember with LAUSD.
I have history with them too, believe me.
So the history was when they passed, what was the name of the last major proposition for building new schools? You remember? I don't know. Well, okay, in that bond proposition where they built hundreds of schools everywhere and retrofit a bunch of schools everywhere, there was a fire inspection fee of millions of dollars because there's so much construction, so many schools, and clearly these are the most, schools and hospitals, the most sensitive locations that have to be and made sure they're made safe. And so the fire inspections with sprinkler systems are very, very complicated, and they require a lot of on-site fire marshals and inspectors to be there almost daily in every piece of the construction phase, and sign off on every single step to ensure not only compliance and regulations, but that they're all working correctly. And it's not just that, it's, from all the way from the way the doors swing open and everything, because you're dealing with kids, so LAUSD was billed, as they should, for millions of dollars over the course of years and years and years of operational costs from the city of LA for all of these inspections. They paid nothing. They reimbursed the city nothing. The city has never gone after those funds. And so I will tell you right now that there's probably, they will not pay when we bill them on this. And I'm not looking for that. But what we can do then is we'll know which schools are triggering multiple false alarms, and we can publicly shame them and go after their principals as well as the school board members that represent them because they're not fixing or training for the problem at these chronic locations, and explain to them exactly what they're doing to the entire public safety system by triggering these false alarms. So it's a little different than the inspection fees. And so that's where I plan on utilizing this information to the schools.
Well, is it possible to amend a state law so that they could be held accountable at the local level for local services?
Well, I can always look at...
I asked that rhetorically.
Yeah. Well, we'll look at amending and seeing if there's anybody willing to amend state law to do that. And while we're up in Sacramento, maybe we can shake the tree a little bit for Prop $47 at the same time.
I think it's a real issue. And I've had dealings with exactly what you described, Mr. Chair, in terms of the school bond and the building of new schools and that multi-billion-dollar renovation and new schools. In my experience, LAUSD, and we're talking 10 years ago now, they didn't respect any local laws whatsoever. If they wanted to vacate a street, they felt they could just start tearing up the street, even though they did need local permission to do that. So on more than one occasion, we had to send a cease and desist to LAUSD for some of their construction behaviors back in the day. I think it's the culture there, if not to slam them too harshly, because I love the public school system, but I think that it's something that we should anticipate, and we should not be on the hook for their negligence in terms of our responses. So I'm absolutely happy to lobby for a change in state laws so that local schools can be held responsible for bad management of their alarm systems.
All right, thank you. Anything to add to that, colleagues? Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and approve this and move it forward to the council. I would ask that it be rescheduled for the first public safety committee meeting after the recess. So the recess is in July. So we're going to be looking at the first public safety committee meeting in August, just for an update, see where we're at. Okay, if that's reasonable. Okay, so we'll do that and move this to the full city council. Great. Thank you very much for all your hard work on this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay. With that concludes the agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you all. Be safe.
I hate the idea of